Broad Broad background, working in a variety of organizations, educational institutions, startups, and Fortune 500 companies. He's a player and a coach, driving results through team performance, leading by example with a personalized and flexible style. Known by his colleagues and customers for devotion to people and humanizing the process to commercialize advanced technology platforms. So, without further delay, Kvesi, over to you, and you can start sharing now.
Thank you. Yeah, let me just get my slide going here and close out some of these bleeps and bloops. See if this video is working. Oh yeah, all right, good. Hello everybody. I'd like people to see my face first and see that I exist. I have my Amazon certified t-shirt on for when I got certified, and I'm excited to talk to you today about Amazon's culture, our culture of innovation. Okay, let's share. We don't use Zoom as much as we should here. We have our own collaboration. Zoom is way better. It means that I don't practice with it as much as I should. Where's the share screen? Oh, no. Oh, screen share. All right. Okay, let's see. Are you able to see my slide, or
Yep.
are you seeing the note screen?
No, we seen the presentation. Thank you.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you all so much for having me. Apologies for being a little bit tardy, but we'll still have plenty of time to get through the entire presentation as well as Q&A. I was told that you like to be a little bit interactive, so I will try to have a few points where we have some interactive points. No pressure if you don't want to answer any questions, either in chat or live, but just know that you will have that opportunity, because the more interactive this is, the more I can personalize it to your specific questions. So what is this session? You see me here in Amazon. Of course, I'm not really in that office today, but we used to have a lot of meetings here pre-pandemic. And when people came into these meetings, we would talk about products at Amazon, whether it was Prime or Video or AWS, and it was databases and compute and storage. But they would say, no, but Amazon, how do you innovate? How do you bring new products to market? So we would have some people that would be able to talk about it anecdotally, but we realized actually more and more people were asking about it. It became the most requested topic. We created a program called Amazon's Culture of Innovation. So I am a certified speaker, able to deliver this content and really speak to how Amazon approaches culture. And we believe that culture is at the core of everything that we do, and really helps us define ourselves as an organization, but also really focus on our customers. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. So it all starts with a mission. So our mission is to be the Earth's most customer-centric company. So I've worked at a number of other Silicon Valley companies here in San Francisco, and I could tell you the customer was not always first. It was the technology. Was it cool? The brand awareness. Was it in a really interesting space? Those things are all important. But at Amazon, it's about the customer. So we bring that retail feel even into our B2B, our business to business consumer spaces. You might not know, but Amazon is actually named after, well, you probably know that, it's named after the largest river system in the world. But the reason for that is also our goal of being the largest, at that time, book reseller, but also one of the largest companies in the world. And you'll see how size and scale helps us serve our customers better. So what do we mean by innovation? This is our culture of innovation talk. We believe that innovation starts with the customer and works backwards. It doesn't start with a product or a technology moving to marketing it and selling it. It starts with what is the customer, who is the customer, what does that customer want, and how can we meet those needs and desires. So there are many advantages. You'll hear Jeff Bezos talk about this if you haven't already. This is from his letter to the shareholders back in 2016. What he was saying here is that customers are always beautifully, wonderfully dissatisfied, even when they report being happy with business as usual. Why is that? Well, it's human nature to always want more. If you bring the same product that we had in 2016, if we hadn't innovated since then, it might have been fine, but there's additional things that they may want, new things that are available. Also, it puts us in the mind state of to never be satisfied with what we're doing, constantly looking at new ways to delight our customers. So this is at the core of some of our beliefs around innovation. You probably have seen a number of these different areas that Amazon plays in. E-commerce, I have 2 to 3 boxes delivered almost every day, a lot more in pandemic. Now I'm venturing out a little bit, but I still have lots of things delivered. The group that I'm in, which is our Amazon Web Services, which is our cloud capabilities, our devices, things like Alexa and Echo devices, as well as the Kindle devices, streaming content, right, which is around video streaming. You might have heard that we recently entered into a deal with MGM, which allowed us to have access to streaming content like the James Bond catalog. So again, we're constantly looking to improve. Nobody asked us to do that, but we're constantly looking to innovate on our customers' behalf. And then the retail and the food area. So consumable products through our Whole Foods acquisition, and then physical retail stores, which are very exciting. If you ever come visit us in Seattle or in San Francisco, where I'm based, the physical retail stores will be open at that point. You can see how we don't have to have any tellers. So we use a lot of digital imaging to see which products you have and then automatically charge you on the way out. It's very, very exciting. So even that, we're looking to innovate the customer experience. The growth flywheel, I also refer to it as a virtuous cycle, starts with having as much selection as possible on our platform. We started by only selling Amazon products, Amazon books, right? Then we invited other sellers onto our platform in order to be able to sell there. That drove more and more selection. What does more selection do? More selection allows us to increase or improve the customer experience. Now, if I look for almost anything, I go directly to the Amazon.com site. So I have a better experience by having a broader set of products available. What does that do? It increases the traffic, and then more and more traffic on our site invites more and more sellers to our site, and then the cycle continues. What that allows for, that increased scale, allows us to have a lower cost structure. That's where Big helps customers. We can lower our cost structure, and then we can pass those cost savings onto our customers. Low prices on the Amazon.com site, and in AWS, we've lowered our prices a number of times, and we'll continue to do so when we can.
So Chrissy,
yes,
an interesting question about pricing, right? So, and we had like several discussions about the platform. So I think that you're absolutely right that Amazon started with the low prices, but right now people are so used to Amazon and the ways of the Amazon that price is no longer a differentiator.
Right.
So how do you look internally on that phenomenon? Is that pretty much? I think one of our speakers on Tuesday said that 47 searches for the products actually start on Amazon and not on Google. Because like people use it as a default delivery and default carrier. So how do you see that part, that Amazon is to the point that, I wouldn't say they don't care about the pricing, but they care less about the pricing?
Absolutely. So we look to lower prices when at all possible. At a certain point, just by leveraging the internet, right? It was cheaper to buy some of our products than it was with people that had retail overhead and all those types of things. So that was the initial revolution of using the internet really to as an e-commerce platform. That's becoming a common playing field, right? So now that other people are able to use the internet as that platform, then that ability to lower prices becomes pretty even. So what else are we looking to do? So two additional things. One, quality of service. So, I will sometimes buy something that's more expensive on Amazon than the other just because of the ease of working with them. So I had a product that showed up the other day, and it was two completely different shoes for my son. It was crazy. Some places it's really easy to just get a return envelope and send it off. But where I live, it's hard to do that and hand it off. It was really easy for me because we're integrated with all the different aspects of Amazon to just really say, I want to return, get the barcode, and then drop it off at Whole Foods. Why was that convenient? I was going to Whole Foods anyway to do some shopping. So it wasn't an extra trip. So we'll look at things like that to improve the customer experience. Then the other thing that we will also do is have added value. So when I signed up for Prime and the paid membership associated with that, what does that Prime membership also get me? It gets me streaming capabilities. It gets me a discount at Whole Foods. So we're also looking to add additional value to that of a membership as far as being part of Amazon. So thinking bigger in some cases, it might not be the best price for just one thing, but how are we helping the overall customer experience? And if they want to buy one or two things from another company based on price, that's fine. But we're hoping to build a longer relationship by providing additional value of working with Amazon or being an Amazon customer.
Thanks so
Great
much.
question.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about these 4 areas, and again, please keep interacting and asking questions. This is fun. Culture, which is about how we obsess over our customers and how we hire people that sort of live and breathe that culture. We call them builders. So some of them are physical builders, but some of them it's just about building better processes. We hire people that come in with that type of DNA. But you have to have mechanisms to track and manage and measure some of those things. We don't want to have processes just for process sake, but we do have to have certain mechanisms to know how certain things are working. If we were to increase this input, we get this output, or vice versa. There must be an infrastructure that supports it, different tools. Then we'll talk specifically about some of the technology that's in place that supports our culture. And then a little bit about organizations, things like small pizza teams that help us really innovate and innovate more quickly. So let's talk about our leadership principles. First, what are leadership principles? So as Amazon was growing early on, it was easy to have the first few people have direct access to Jeff Bezos or really understand the story of Amazon from its beginnings so that we could continue Amazon the way that it was really set up. As we started to grow and really grow at an exponential rate, we realized that we were hiring on leaders who were looking to build their own teams that didn't have all of the information about what it means to really be an Amazonian. So we said, well, what are leaders, right? Leaders are people that learn and be curious. They have invent and simplify. So it's not this not invented here mentality, and they obsess over our customers. The most important leadership principle out of this is at the bottom, unless you know better ones. So that is the idea of continuing to improve these. We've had some early leadership principles that have fallen off and some new ones that grow. So we will continue to evolve our DNA. Let me put up the different leadership principles. Did we want to do this through the chat, or did we have a polling question on the different leadership principles? I'm not sure if we got that in, if I got that in time or not.
Yes. Let me go and see if I can. No, wait, that's from the previous. Let me just give me a second.
Sure.
I'm just trying to see. Okay, let me see if I can do stuff share results. Oh yeah, I think here it is. All right, so I'm launching the polling. So please vote on the what leadership principles do you think is most important for innovation? And And we unfortunately have only 10 options, so I know it's not on all
Oh,
14,
okay,
but please go ahead and vote on those principles,
perfect.
and I will share the results.
Yeah, so everybody just take a minute. And then what I'll do is I'll talk through some of the top ones and then also some of my favorites.
All right, we have.
Okay, let's see what we got.
All right, so okay, I think that everyone who wanted. Um, so our clear winner is customer obsession.
Mm-hmm,
Then the next one is learn and be curious.
mm-hmm.
Then we have a tie for 3, which is invent and simplify, hire and develop the best, and the think big. And then common last was insight, insist on highest standards, frugality, and bias for action.
Yep. Okay. Perfect. All right. So let's talk about these for a little bit. So I'm glad customer obsession came in first. That is my favorite one. And obviously everything we do works backwards from the customer, right? We obsess over our customers. What does customer obsession really mean though? It really means we understand who the customer is, not all customers, but this particular solution is targeted at this particular customer. I was talking to a roofing company yesterday, and one is, okay, well, is the customer the end customer? And if so, are you positioning it to me, my wife, or my kids? Right? One might be much more about the cost, the other about the safety, the other about the aesthetics. Right? So, what are you really focusing on by understanding that customer? Turns out they care less about me and more about the contractors who do the installations. Because if they work with those contractors, more likely those contractors are to find the right roof within that particular company and sort of convince the end customers. So it turns out it's not the end customers, it's actually the contractors that are their primary customers. And their customers evolved. The government cares a lot about in a particular area, especially in low income areas, when was the roof last replaced? How many of the roofs in a particular area have been replaced? So my wife's family is from a place in the U.S. called New Orleans, and they had a hurricane, and a lot of the roofs got blown off, but mostly the roofs that were more than X amount of years old. So now when a natural disaster is coming or headed towards a particular area, the government wants to know what percentage of the roofs in that area have been replaced in the last 5 years or 10 years. So there's another customer for this roofing company because they have that type of information as well. So love customer obsession. I also love that learn and be curious was really important. So the technology of today is not the technology of yesterday, right? The databases have changed, the development platforms have changed, all of those things. But you really need a learn and be curious in order to really understand, okay, let me learn about these new technologies. That's one thing. But let me learn, why did customers move, right? So the question about price sensitivity was great. I'm very curious when customers go other places. It's not to shame them. It's to say, well, why did you do that? I'm very curious, was it, if it's the price, but there was no return policy, is that still okay, right? No judgment, just very curious about your thought process there. And then what do? Use that to help improve what we're doing. It's very important. Hiring is important. I think we all sort of realize that, but let me just jump to think big really quickly. Thinking small, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you only think that this is all you're capable of, then that's all you're going to be able to do. It's okay, and the organization must support it. Again, I worked at organizations that didn't support thinking big because they didn't also believe in being wrong, right? So to think big means that I'd like to push the envelope, and if I don't quite get there, it's not a failure that I didn't get there. I probably got more than if I just took a smaller goal and blew it out of the park. So those are some of the most important ones I'm pretty excited about, and I'll talk about a few more as we go. So invent and simplify. This was one that was we talked about a little bit.
Kwesi, sorry to interrupt, but I think like Dagobert brought an interesting point, and I was thinking about it that given that Bezos quote before this question about customer obsession and putting it here, there's also another quote, yeah, which is attributed to the many people, and most often it is attributed to the to Henry Ford, which is not. But like effectively, if I would be asking my customers what do they want a bigger horse, and then faster horse, sorry. And then Steve Jobs said, well, they don't know what my customers want because I didn't yet show them what they want, right? So how do you balance that? And I think like that's one of the really big problems of the innovation. When you really create something new, when you really create something that hasn't been done before, how do you reference it, right? Because like customers, I'm dead sure that very few customers in 2004 would say, oh, our next phone, we want to have a smartphone, because it wasn't a thing, right? And maybe some of those server people, they would never say, oh, we wanted to have AWS, right? So stuff like that. So how do you balance that? How do you balance that innovation that is not necessarily coming from the customers, but you have that almost a hinge that this will going to be a great hit?
Absolutely. So, well, we don't, and I'm going to show you a little bit later about some very famous Amazon failures, right? You have to recognize that that is going to happen. Hindsight 2020, I don't believe that the Model T, they had the infrastructure to really understand what their customers wanted, right? No polling, no survey, internet surveys, right? It would have been very hard for them to do what we can do now in terms of understanding what a customer would want. But in hindsight, let's look at the Model T. Of course, they wanted a faster horse. But what if you wanted a horse that you didn't have to feed as often, right? There's ways to sort of tease that out. What if you had a horse that could last longer, right? That didn't have to stop for, bio breaks or whatever, right? If you understand what a customer wants to do, which is to get from point A to point B, can you get from point A to point B faster? Can you get from point A to point B with less money, less effort, right? So
have you seen the gas prices recently? Have you seen the gas prices recently? I don't actually think it's actually cheaper
than owning a horse. I still would believe
I
that.
don't know. Yeah, it's true. It's true.
I have another question. I have a little bit of feeling that it's nice what you have written down, and it's good to read. Yeah, but that's not the main point. I mean, in any case, you could write down another name of another company, and it would also fit. So for me, for culture, it's more how is the culture lived in a company,
yep.
And what are the stories and what makes it special. For example, I've been in another talk for Amazon, and there was a story that you have a pizza. So if two people with a pizza sitting together, they can invent something, or you have this kind of
yep.
story that you have to create a press release. So I'm more interested.
That's where I'm headed.
How you make this culture visible and livable. So the principles are nice to know, but you read it and the next day you forget it. So what makes it really special? Maybe you come to this later on.
That's the entire rest of this presentation. Yep, great question.
Oh, great, really great.
Absolutely. So let's talk about some specific...
Don't want to interrupt you. Sorry.
No worries. No, this is great. Raise your hand if you had the original Amazon Kindle. I think you can raise your hand on this platform.
Yeah, you can do a reaction in chat, or you can click on yeah. Someone says yes.
Okay. Well, yeah. While we're doing that, so let's think about the Kindle. So very specific to Amazon, we have a big revenue stream coming in from selling books to a lot of other people, and we had some competitors in that space that wanted to continue making money selling books. We introduced this idea of being able to have any book that you want at your fingertips within minutes. We joke about minutes, right? In the age of gig speed internet, that was dial up. So it's probably seconds now, but in minutes, have any book at your fingertips. So willingness to be misunderstood. So it does cannibalize some of your existing revenue stream, but by listening to your customers, you could say, well, actually, where do customers mostly read their books? It's actually on vacation. So can we get to a place where it's waterproof? Can you get to a place where the glare is decreased? So there's this willingness to be misunderstood for a short amount of time by the market, but by understanding what your customers are really asking for. Which leads us to things like AWS, which has done price reductions for over 85 price reductions in 6 years. Software almost never does that.
Can I just
right?
ask another question? I mean, if you invented before, you could not ask customers if they want to have this kind of product. So how did you anticipate that there is a wish? I mean,
yeah, we'll get into
the
very specific mechanisms.
Maybe 10 years ago, everybody would say, "Oh, I don't know. I want to have a physical one." I mean,
exactly. Yeah. So we'll get into the very specific mechanisms so that get us to that point. In this case with AWS, what happened? So Andy Jassy, who is going to be our CEO of all of Amazon, who's now the CEO of AWS, was working for Jeff Bezos. And what he observed was that innovation was taking a long time because we were buying a lot of hardware, we were provisioning it. These are all things we take for granted now. But in 2006, nobody realized that was possible. So first there was an observation, right, done by somebody that says, okay, I'm looking at this, and I'm seeing what's slowing down innovation. Then he writes a document, and I'll discuss what a document looks like in a little bit, that has multiple people's personalities and feedback based upon that document. Then the approvals start, then we do some testing of it, and then we launch AWS. So it does start by looking at what the problem is, and in our case, just within Amazon, to bring out new features and to test new things, there was this process of procuring hardware and spending a lot of time and money on developing that solution before we are able to really deploy it. So this is theoretical, but let's be very specific. This is what was the request. So obviously you want to move quickly. Let's be actual. Is this a one-way door or a two-way door? Is the question that we want to ask, whether or not we're going to head more towards bias for action, or if we're going to dive deep and really understand everything. Is the decision like opening a new Amazon Web Services data center in a new country, because we have to either buy a physical location or rent it, understand the energy consumptions and the requirements there, and figure out all the different options there? We would consider that a one-way door. Doesn't mean that if we roll it out and it's not successful, we won't stop, but there is a lot of capital investment associated with that. But am I going to do a price reduction or change the color of the Amazon.com webpage, or just offer one new product that I can take down if it doesn't work? If it is a easily reversible decision, we want bias for action, right? It allows you to innovate, avoid analysis paralysis, and move quickly. But doesn't mean that you do that for a one-way door type solution. And in talking to many customers, we've realized that a lot more of the decisions that they make are really two-way doors. So there's an opportunity to move faster. All right, let's talk mechanisms for a little bit. So if you I'm keeping track of time here. If you remember nothing from today except the leadership principles and then these mechanisms, that will be successful. So what's a mechanism? So I'm an AWS, and I'm in business development. So I expect the input of running some type of sales campaign or sales process to have a certain amount of outputs. So which means if I increase the inputs, I should be increasing the outputs. But in order to do that, I need to have a mechanism in place. In my particular case, that tool is Salesforce. The adoption means all of the reps who are leveraging it need to actually be putting the opportunities in, and then I have to have an ability to report. I have to have an ability to inspect what I expect out of that. So in this case, it's an Amazon example, but it's no Amazon tools, right? It's actually third-party tools. Again, with invent and simplify doesn't mean that we invent all the tools. It has to do with the fact that we have buy-in and we have a process to it, whether it's something large or something small. Releasing a product releasing a capability, we do have to have these early mechanisms. So I like this working backwards. So there were some questions on exactly what we would do. I'm going to address them in this next section on how we would look at anything that we do. The old way of doing things, or what we call a day two methodology, is you come up with a product, you develop that product, you market that product, then you try to sell that product and hope that customers like it. We believe that that is backwards. So the working backwards methodology means let's start with the customer and work backwards to actually developing something that the customer wants. Who is the customer, right? Be very specific about who the customer is for this particular solution. If we don't know, let's go back. So we don't build new products. We understand who the customer is and what we want to do with that customer. What is the opportunity? Is the benefit clear? How do you know what they want? And what is the customer experience? So several questions were asked, how do we know? So there are several ways that you can know, and I'll give you some very specific examples, but the structure and the methodology is not prescriptive in how you know, it's do you know? And if you don't, how can you go and find out? Again, innovative. So we're not telling the people coming up with products, this is the way you must get the information, because that will be a barrier to innovation. But we are inspecting what they know about that information and just asking questions about it. So let's take some examples. So I work with a database migration program that we weren't sure if customers needed it. We start with a press release because I knew, I think I spoke with about 100 customers before developing this program. And based upon what the customers were telling me, I was able to bucket into a couple of different places. So my particular process for this one was interviewing a number of customers. That might not be the only way to do it. You might be interviewing analysts. You might be, using market research. You might buy data on trends. You might talk to venture capitalists, right? So the question of how do you know is there's no one answer to how you know. It is a question of making sure that we as innovative people and builders at Amazon have a strategy for figuring that out. But that's not where it ends. We start by creating something called a press release. Amazon releases new database migration program. It allows customers to benefit. Pretend quote, customer XYZ says, this sped up my ability to move to cloud by 10 times. Without this feature, I would have done X, Y, and Z, right? And you could really sort of push and pull on what the benefit of that is for your customers. So this is a press release. It is not released public. It's an internal confidential document, but it's written as if the product exists. Why do that? It illustrates the answers to those questions. Do we really know who the customer is? Do we know what the benefit is in the customer's terms? And then we review it. Our write a lot, which is a leadership principle, does not mean that I always have all the answers. It also means seeking a diverse opinion, diversity in any way that it means. So seeking a very diverse set of people to review your press release, provide detailed feedback on it, and improve. I'll move on to FAQs and visuals in a second, but let me just pause there because I heard a number of questions about sort of how we know. Were there questions?
Yeah, I think Dagobert has an interesting question, right? So I think when we're talking about AWS, it's interesting. It's interesting that that Amazon customers, pretty much everyone is Amazon customer, right? And the interesting thing is that obviously that you cannot have, or at least I would think, you cannot have an quote unquote Amazon innovation, right? That's like, okay, we have a person who comes on the website and this is like all the things that we can have, right? And not only they can be your B2C customers, but they can also be your B2B customers. And then you have all of those different teams. So you work in AWS, you have your own KPIs, you have your own things to do. Then when you have your e-commerce, you have your Kindle and all of that. So how do you actually know and how do you prioritize for this multifaceted customer?
Yep. So yeah, there's an implication there that there's a central decision-making process that's prioritizing each and every one of these. So the thing to sort of unlearn a little bit is different than a lot of organizations is the lack of that central brain that is going to answer each of these questions, right? I've worked at other companies where it's whatever the CEO said, that's what you did. Each individual opportunity lives in its own merit. So somebody mentioned things like 2 pizza teams. So small teams with the ability to innovate in their own area, and then does that individual idea have merit? So we talked about the benefits of e-commerce and Whole Foods working together. But that doesn't mean that if Whole Foods wants to do something, that we have to consider the benefits to the other groups at that point in time. We do not, right? So there's an innovative culture to say, does this work well for Whole Foods? And more importantly, does this work really well for that customer that's walking in the door within Whole Foods? So that one answer by itself will be reviewed. And if this diverse group of people that reviews it sees merit in it, then we will move forward with it. Again, with the mechanisms to check to see that it's successful and understanding that it's a two-way door where if that one idea wasn't successful, we can back out of it. And it's the combination of all of those little ideas that lead to these big ideas in this large corporation. I know that's a bit of a change from other things, so I'll pause to see if there was a follow-up question on that.
I think we're good.
Okay, good. So let's say we have this little idea.
Yeah, actually. So this is actually very, very interesting. So you check that idea internally or with customers, or how do you actually, evaluate that idea?
Yeah, that's a great point. So internally, so this initial press release and FAQ process is an internal process. So we're not at the point of piloting something with a customer. That comes a little bit later. But there should have been some conversations with the customer, as I mentioned, gathering market data to support your hypothesis, but you're not sharing this press release yet with a customer. This is an internal document. Okay. But then you have this idea of, let's use something outside of AWS. So this new ability to use drones to drop packages on my front porch because I have a big fence and I don't want anybody to leave it outside, right? So just that idea by itself, we get the customer benefits in the press release. But the FAQ goes a little bit deeper in what we're trying to do. Is it available in all cities? Is there a limit on how big the packages can be, right? What are some of the key questions that we think people would want to ask? That's where the FAQ process comes in. So together we call this the PR FAQ process. And each of these is then reviewed. Sometimes we'll use visuals. I don't tend to use visuals with the solutions that I'm working with, but if it's a customer facing event, what does the customer experience look like?
So actually a good follow-up question on that. So how if you don't check it with the customers to the extent, then there's going to be failed ideas, and I think Amazon had the Fire Phone and a couple others there.
That's where I was going to. Yep.
But and I think it's just in general, it's a very interesting topic of the innovations, that when you're doing something new, the risks are high and therefore the failures are inevitable. So how do you assess the teams with failed ideas? Robert asks. Or in general, how do you assess the performance of innovation teams?
I'm trying to see if I want to just jump ahead. Let me just talk through it. I have slides on it later, but I'll just talk through it. How do you assess success and failure? Right, we're a data-driven company, right? So rolling out something, there's some goal that you expect to get. Obviously, there was a think big associated with it. So if you're going to do 100 widgets, let's say 100 is not big, but just for this example, 100 of those within a certain amount of time, is that good or is that bad? Right? Think big, and if you hit 75, is that still good? Or if you do like 5 or 6, was that good? So the program that I rolled out, for instance, we ended up having 6 successes in the first year. My goal was 100. So was that a failure or was my time off? Turns out my time was off because we ended up having a big ramp, but that ramp came year 2, year 3. So the first thing we did is we looked at, well, what's the average time it took to migrate a database? Turns out it was 6 to 18 months. So that 1 year goal that I had was just unrealistic. The other thing about failure, so the Fire Phone is this perfect example. I have some pretty slides on it later, but that is a very important one. So we realized that the failure was not in the phone, the failure was in the application store. So developers were already developing to the iOS and developing to the Android OS. We were starting to ask them to develop for a third platform. So that was always going to be slow. And the advantage of this thing, oh, you can't even see it. I love it. There it is. Of this phone is the apps that are on there. So we realized that by being third in the app market, we would never have all the applications that our customers wanted. So that was the failure, was not having the leading app store and realizing that we never would. But what else was good about that though? The phone itself was good. So what we ended up doing is all these different Alexa devices. So the ability to listen and the microphone that was built into it, we realized was next level compared to the microphones in other areas. So if you talk to Alexa, you might hear that she hears a little bit better than some of the other devices and can tell the difference between it's you asking or your child asking. So we took the hardware value of it and realized that there was a different software aspect of what then became Alexa that could then become the Echo devices and the Echo frames. So that's an example of turning a failure into a success. We do have examples of failures that never turn into anything, but the debrief of the failure allows us to realize, well, is there an opportunity to repurpose some of the successes within that innovation?
So, but would you say that quote unquote failure with some of those projects, do you think it's a career damaging to the people who are working on it?
No. So what ended up happening is the majority of the people working on the Fire Phone went on to work with Echo. We have a number of other examples. So a lot of people that work in the group that I'm in came from a failed browser experience. So part of innovation is that the culture has to believe that the idea itself is what failed, not the people. So part of this writing culture helps us divorce ideas from individual people, so that the people that work on it probably did some really good analysis and maybe they have some great capabilities that would work someplace else. We also see people move departments a decent amount at Amazon, more than other organizations that I've worked with as well.
Okay.
Excellent. All right, so let me just get through 2 more things. So make sure I end on time and everything. What's important about the writing, I want to make a couple of points. One, you come into a meeting and everybody's quiet and they're reading for the first 20 minutes and they're writing information about it. One, it means that it doesn't matter how well the person is articulating the great idea with energy and passion, right? Some bad ideas get through because of the passion of the presenters, and some really good ideas don't get through if the delivery is not so great. So you can divorce those two by writing the idea itself down. Also, that seeking diverse opinions, multiple people can say, is this really right? Is this the right customer benefit? What about mobile devices? So we talked about not talking to customers yet. Well, we are talking to internal stakeholders. They do have customer experience of, I'm not quite sure customers would like this. Can you get a little bit more detail about that? Can we pivot the messaging here? So we're really beating up that idea so that the diamond on the inside really comes out of the most important part of that idea. That's what happened with AWS. There were lots of ways that it was written so that it could be, we were defining the cloud market, but there were enough people that said, well, these are the kinds of things that you needed to do, so that we were sort of able to launch with a decent amount of success, but still have mechanisms to improve as we went.
Yeah, Kwesi, and we have, and if you need extra time, we are totally fine on that.
Okay. Oh, good. That's excellent. Let me actually make sure I don't have something afterwards. I will definitely stay on. I love these questions. I will just tell you guys, these are the most questions I've gotten in a virtual environment. In person, we used to get a lot of questions, but as we've gone to virtual, yep, my next call is internal and those people can wait. Customer obsession. You're my customer and you're always my first priority. Let's see. I don't want to do a poll, but I want to see if I want to do more of a technical discussion or more innovation around what it means. Is there a way to get a sense of how many people have more of a technical background on this call?
We mainly have people who are more on the innovation side. So
Okay,
probably
perfect.
so someone disagrees, please do let us know. But let's take probably the innovation route. I think that's going to be a little
Perfect.
bit more productive.
Let me do that. So I'll still cover this slide, but I'll cover it in a non-technical way. Each of these are microservices on the Amazon.com webpage. What does that mean? My experience and your experience are totally different. It may look similar, but they're completely different applications. So, you know, my recommendations and my country and my delivery options and my sort of taxes will be very different than yours, maybe even language preferences. And the reason why the Amazon.com webpage can do that is it leverages lots of small innovations that are independent of each other. So the metaphor, without the technical aspect of it, the metaphor is to have this API. So don't have tight coupling between data and the innovative piece, but can I have a loosely coupling that allows me to work in my small two pizza teams, but work in a way that is related to others, but I don't have to check with those other teams as long as I'm working against that central API. How many things can be self-service? How many of those small pizza teams can just go to a self-service thing to get their physical resources or technical resources without having to ask the gatekeeper, right? Can I innovate and innovate quickly without having to do a lot of checks? But innovate within a box, meaning by using the technical aspect of an API, but moving it to a metaphor is the API says, here are the data elements and here are the security requirements and here is the right to use, right? Taking that outside of the technical realm is, do I know what things I can leverage without having to ask? Am I allowed to extend this? Can I change the color of that? Can I add a new piece here? But if I add more than X amount, I need to check with a certain person in order to approve it. So understanding how much I can innovate without checking, but also have a process in place so I know when I've done too much or I need to actually check with a leader or a supervisor or something. So let's not worry about the technology. So one thing I do want to talk about is this. So, and it works from metaphor as well as technically. You have to be able to experiment quickly, right? It has to be a low cost to fail, and then an ability to have a low cost success scale. Okay. At Amazon, that's why we came up with AWS, because people, in order to experiment, they would have to buy hardware and they have to do all these things. Once they did, they were also less likely to throw it away because the cost to get to that solution was there. Right? You can think about movies. If I do just sort of like something that's relatively inexpensive and I'm building something there, I'll just scrap it, right? If it's not that expensive. But if there's a lot of money tied to it, there's a mental aspect that says, I'm going to probably keep it because I've invested a lot in it. So we want to make it cheaper to experiment, low cost to fail, but also if you happen to do something successful, I don't know if you've ever seen something where you come in and an intern does something that's really exciting and then everybody's using it across the organization, but nobody knows how it actually got started or how to change it. So we want innovation in order to have this type of architecture to support that. Compression algorithm for experience. This was a really good question. So people talked about two pizza teams. So how do we do two pizza teams, whether it is on Amazon Prime, Amazon Wallet, all of those types of things? People talked about when do we sort of work with customers? So we've done this working backwards. We've built this product and now we've launched it. But who launched it? Not this central organization has a lot of process around it. This small two pizza team launched this small piece of innovation. And by sitting that small two pizza team close to their customers with the right mechanisms, that small two pizza team knows how that individual innovation is working with their own mechanisms, and then realizing what aspects that are two-way doors, so they will continue to innovate. Amazon.com launched over 200 million innovations to our website, and the site never went down. So that question about, well, where does the innovation happen? It has to happen in that small two pizza team as part of the overall solution. But organizationally, you have to be okay with that small two pizza team failing, especially in a two-way door, but understand that they have the mechanisms in order to check to see how it's doing and then recover from failure when at all possible. And if that whole failure is this whole team stops focusing on this, can we refocus that team as is someplace else? Or can we understand the capabilities of those individuals and put them on some of these other innovation projects that are booming?
Just
I'll pause there.
Do you think that this principle with the two pizza teams, with the small teams, only work, let's say, at a company like Amazon, which is already so much advanced in the customer experience that you just fine-tune little things? So if you are a company just starting to build up something, this will probably not work. Or what is?
Absolutely. Would you mind telling me a little bit about either the company you're with or the industry even that you're in, so I can maybe personalize the response?
Oh, I'm in consulting, so it's
okay.
It's not really.
Sure. No, great. But I understand how I can still answer it in a different way because of that. So the question is, do I think it only can work in certain organizations? Let's talk about what happens if you don't have it. So when it comes to collaboration, the optimal team for collaboration, the optimal team size is 1. I'm spending 100% of my time on innovation and no time in collaboration. The more you grow your team, the more you find spending more time on collaboration and less time on innovation. So that's why you should strive for those smaller teams. If you have a really large team because you have something really big to do, can we break up the work into smaller chunks where individuals can be innovative with less communication overhead, but maybe working on something that's a little bit more focused? So is the belief that this can work with any organization? Yes, any organization that wants to have innovation as a focus, it is absolutely better to have smaller, more agile teams. Good question. Other questions? Oh, sorry, I'll tell these people I'm running late. So Windows here. Okay. You've heard all of the slogans and things, right? So I won't do that, but I do think that this one fits. I think you heard other people say something similar. Failure and invention are inseparable twins, right? You have to believe that if you know something is going to work, you are not experimenting, right? There's plenty of times where, I'm using this deck and I'm trying a few things, but I'm not really experimenting because I know they're going to work. But, the polling question, that was new, right? So I didn't know if that would work. So at any point in time, if you know it's going to work, you're executing. And there's absolutely a time to execute, right? Execution is really an important leadership principle also within Amazon, right? But there is a time to innovate. And that innovate and experimentation means that you don't know it's going to work, which means you can't penalize people for certain experiments not working, or else culturally you haven't fully adopted innovation. And then I gave this example already, but I still love the visuals, right? Look how excited Jeff was when the Fire Phone came out, right? So, even at the CEO level, we were very excited about this. There are also competitors that were making a lot of money in marketplaces and a lot of money in auctions. I'm sure you know a really popular auction site. So we thought it makes sense for Amazon to get into that space. We didn't. We didn't do well. those people didn't get fired. They're working on other things because they had the leadership principles of invent and simplify and think big and all these things. By having those leadership principles, you could apply them in other areas. And as we said, the hardware in the microphones and in the fidelity of listening that turned out to be a great innovation is repurposed in Echo glasses, Echo Dots, and the other Alexa devices. So this is an example of that failure turning into a success. We have plenty of examples of failures that just really didn't go anywhere, and that's okay. And for the most part, those people end up moving into other areas. Again, why? We hire for these leadership principles, not always the functional capabilities. There's a functional bar you must be above. But in our interview process, we're saying, tell me about a time that you failed. What did you learn from it? Tell me about a time you had to do something that your manager didn't understand, right? We are interviewing for people that have that type of DNA so that when something doesn't go well at Amazon, they're already the type of person that's looking to invent and simplify, do something new, right? Innovate in a different way. Okay. So I went out of order. So actually, I'll pause for questions in just a second. I went out of order a little bit, but I want you to see how these things build on each other. It starts with the DNA of our people. Then you must have mechanisms in order to get that type of information to the smart people with the right type of DNA. You have to have an architecture that allows you to fail fast and fail in a less expensive way than in other places, so that people with the right culture and the right mechanisms, and then they must be set up in the right type of organizations that is not as rigid. So all of those things work together. Can you be successful with just some or the others? Absolutely. But from Amazon's case, we've learned that it's really the connection of each of these that allows us to continue to innovate, even now that we're at over 1 million employees. So you asked questions as you went, but I'm sure there's probably a few more you might want to ask.
All right. So do we have any questions for Questa left?
Yeah, my question is a little bit, what is if Amazon decided to go into a new area?
Mm-hmm.
So this is not a small innovation. Let's say you want to have sometime a digital coin or something like that. So how are these big decisions made?
Absolutely. So it might not be a big decision at all. So it probably starts with writing. There's another type of document that we didn't cover, and that's called the 6-pager. So AWS starts with a 6-page document, which starts with, okay, here's the market opportunity, here's what we're going after, but it still has the same elements of who are the customers. I'll be honest, with digital currency, I haven't gotten into it yet because I don't even know who the customers are, right? And I'm still personally confused by that. But you must understand who the customers are, what they're looking for. Okay. What is missing in the current area? What is the opportunity that we're going after? So that's a much longer document than a press release of what is it we're going through. And then depending on the size and the scale will depend on who must approve it. So I might write I'm writing a 2-page document right now that my boss has to approve, and then we can just go. My 6-page document might go to my boss's boss, right? Might even go all the way up to Jeff Bezos, depending on the scale of what is being asked for. So for something that's really large, it's a longer document and it's more peer reviews, and it's a higher level within the organization that would have to approve it before we move forward, but it's the same concepts.
But there's not any kind of, let's say, moonshot thinking like at Google. So you're the complete opposite. Yes, you are improving and step by step.
So I'm not clear on Google's moonshot, right? I'm just not clear of that. This 6-page document could be something completely new, right? Mm-hmm. I'd like to come up with a way for people to grow 10 extra inches, right? There's still a 6-page document that you would want to write if it's that big. What is the opportunity? Who is the customer? who you're reaching for, right? It does absolutely start with knowing your customer. It's not just about a new technology for technology's sake.
I got maybe a more generic question for you, Crazy. Thank you for sharing what you have presented. Very interesting what you're doing at AWS. Maybe more in a generic sense for Amazon. Where do you see the big areas of innovation for Amazon in the next 2-3 years, if you want to talk about that? And maybe also, where do you see Amazon as a total in 5 to 10 years as a company, as a conglomerate of companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So, no, it's a great question. So, you know, the most innovative places that I've really seen within Amazon recently are one around AI. We think that we often call it machine learning, right? Really machine learning, and how can that help improve a customer experience? I think that we know that and we've been using it, but I'm not sure if we know really the best way to help our customers with it. And you know, and to be transparent, there are times when the technology has not helped certain people, right? Not helped certain people with certain skin complexions. So there's still an opportunity for that technology to be improved. That's one area that I see it. Another area I think has to do with space travel, right? So you know that there's one of Jeff Bezos's company that's dealing with space travel and dealing with satellites and all of that type of things. There's opportunities for helping farmers figure out the best ways to plant, and there's opportunities for more improved communications and things by. But at the end of the day, that's all data, right? So that's from the AWS side. That's what I see. Just 1 minute. That's what I see. But I think that space and that satellite and all of those technologies can make changes that I can't even fathom right now. So that's some of the things that are interesting to me.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good.
So I guess on that note, thank you so much for joining us and sharing some of that Amazon culture and giving the insider view of what is happening in Amazon. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to speak with one of the Amazon employees. Thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Feel free to